I'm Matt Wiederhold. Welcome to another edition of Medina Minute. Today we're going to sit down and talk with some of the faces and the people that you see around town and learn a little bit more about their stories and how they ended up in our town. Thanks for joining us today at Medina Minute. We're here with Bill Lamb, local legend and man about town. Bill, thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
One of my first questions I love to ask, what brought you to Medina, Ohio? How did you end up here?
Well, as simple as it is simple. There was a school principal here named West Florian, and I believe he was a school principal at Ella Canavan and the first school principal at Heritage School.
Okay.
I grew up with him, his family, in west side of Cleveland. I graduated from college in Tennessee, and I called him. I said, where should I go teach? Where should I go? And I had been offered a teaching job in Tennessee, and I thought about staying there in the Cumberland Gap. It was absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. And
I called him, and he said, you've got to come to Medina. You've got to come to Medina. So, it didn't matter to me. He could have said go to Lakewood or Westlake or Kalamazoo. And I said, okay, I'll go to Medina. And I drove out here not knowing, the streets were different, but the one-way streets, and to find the superintendent. I had to meet with the school superintendent. Okay. This is how simple it was. And so I met with him for 10 minutes, and he's like, okay, just go to Ella Canavan. Leonard Mackler is going to sign you up. You're good there.
And when was this? What year was this?
75, okay. 1975. And when you think about applying, when you think about applying for most jobs, teaching job,
yeah.
This was the hardest part of that process was me finding where the superintendent's office was, and it was just over here on the west side of town, and then finding Ella Canavan School.
Yeah.
Little did I know I would end up living 2 blocks from Ella Canavan. At the time, I had no intention. I was not moving here.
How did you get into education? Growing up, did you like helping people learn things, or how did you decide to pursue that?
No, it was always education, because my dad had a friend who sent their son to the university I went to, Lincoln Memorial University, and my dad's thinking was the son of his friend came back and got a job, and so if he sent me to this school, I would come back and get a job.
So it wasn't that you really wanted to do this.
Well,
Dad said you're doing this.
Yeah, it appealed to me. I thought, teaching is fine. And so then it was kind of like, okay, you go here, because if you go here, you'll get a job.
Yeah.
And as the way things turned out, simply having to drive out here and have a 10-minute conversation with the superintendent, I guess my dad was right. That did work.
That's pretty easy.
Yeah. No, I like teaching. It was, I liked the coursework was fine. But
yeah. What grades did you teach? What age students?
My whole history of teaching?
Yeah.
Well, the very first job I had was 3rd grade, and that was at Ella Canavan.
Okay.
And that was because it was the only thing open. And at the end of the year, I told the principal, I said, either I get older kids or I'm going to leave, because I can't. They're 3rd graders, and they would give book reports and I'd fall asleep. It was just not working for me. So I moved to 6th grade, and that's a true story. So I went to 6th grade. And then after I was mayor, I taught at a Catholic, inner city Catholic school in Cleveland. I taught 5th grade.
Okay.
And then I came, and then I did then after that I did Cool Beans, and then I went to Akron and taught at a Jewish school I taught middle school, 6th, 7th, 8th grade for 16 years. So I think it was like 20-some, 25, 26 years.
So we're going to circle back to being mayor. I'm curious, were you teaching at the same time that you were mayor as well?
No, when I was teaching 6th grade at Ella Canavan when I ran for mayor, and so I got elected in November. So I resigned at the end of that year, end of '81. I resigned.
I remember last time we talked, you told me a story about how you even thought about running for mayor.
Yeah.
Remind me of that, because here's what I kind of feel like. Someone makes a suggestion and Bill says, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And you've had this incredibly successful life of, yeah, I can do that, and you've done that. Mm-hmm. Mayor was not something that you had in plan. It wasn't on the list of things to do. Mm-hmm. How did that come about?
Well, I was always interested in politics. In college, I was president of my class and wrote the student government constitution, did things like that. I was always fascinated by politics, because politics gives you what you were just talking about, the ability to say, I think I can do that, because you have then a platform to work from.
Sure.
And so when I was here teaching, and I went to a meeting at Medina Reservoir, there was no reservoirs in Ohio that had private property development right to the shoreline.
And that's Lake Medina?
I was at Lake Medina for a meeting on Lake Medina.
Gotcha.
And but no reservoir in Ohio has private property to the shoreline, but you can build on. And so they were going to build a development there, and the mayor at the time, when they asked him about the water quality, he said if the water turns brown or black, we'll just put some chemicals in and clean it up. And when I heard him say that, I thought, that just doesn't sound right to me.
No, not so much.
Because at that time I was living here, and I thought, if that's all you do to the water, if that's your idea about purifying the water, I think we need to do something different. So I went to the Board of Elections and I said, I lived in Ward 3. I said, I'd like to run for city council. And they said, well, that seat's not up. And I said, well, what seat is up? And they said, well, the mayor is up. And I said, okay, I'll do that. I'll try that. And it isn't that easy. I mean, actually, none of this was quite that easy.
Right.
But that's the reality of how the chain of events kind of went.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you served as mayor for how long?
8 years, 2 terms.
What in your mind, at least in your mind, what are some of your greatest accomplishments or things of which you're most proud when you were mayor?
Including council or just mayor?
Just mayor for now. I mean, you ran on the platform that you were concerned about, quality of life and not putting chemicals in our drinking water. But what else? What were your passions? What did you pursue in that 8 years that you can look back and say, I did that, I changed that?
Well, the historic district had generally been restored, but there was no protection for it. So when I was elected mayor, you could still, if you wanted to, you could completely change a storefront, to any architectural design you wanted to. So there was zero protection. And so working with the planning director, my planning director, Rick Rice, we started to develop a plan for an architectural review to protect the district, because people had worked so hard to get it here. Private business, private property owners, they had worked really hard. It was not the city didn't do it. It was all done privately. And so we started in '82 really on a plan, but a much broader plan, because originally we included most of what's the original village.
Okay.
And the idea is anything that's already built, we were trying to keep a compatibility of architecture.
Okay.
So if you had a totally different kind of architecture, not Victorian, but you had something that was just completely different a block away, then the next thing that was built would be compatible to that. So it wouldn't be like, this is one thing and this is another thing, that hodgepodge feeling that you get. Like a freeway, like when you get off a freeway, it's just whatever. We started on that in 1982, and City Council had zero interest in it. The Board of Realtors opposed it. The Chamber of Commerce opposed it. They said that if it was ever enacted, architectural review, that every business in town would close up and leave. And so I couldn't get it in committee. They were so opposed to it that in 82, 83, 84, 85, so we kept reducing it, trying to make, is this workable? But it didn't even get a hearing because council wouldn't put it in committee.
Really?
Yes. And so we finally pared it down to what it is now, which is 9 blocks.
Right.
And I think it was 1989. It went into committee. I think it passed in 1989. And we agreed to it because my term was going to ending. And so I thought, half a loaf. It wasn't even half a loaf, actually. I don't know what this was. It was just one of the crust. It was just part of it.
Still part of the sandwich.
It's an important part, but it was the same legislation. So that was critical. I don't know. I bought the airport because I knew it would be important for the future. When it was closed, it would have closed forever.
How do you buy an airport?
Well, it was sold. It was going to close. It was being closed.
Okay.
And so we researched it and found out that once an airport closes, it just generally never reopens. And so working with the planning director, we put together a package. A lot of it was FAA funds, and finally got council on board because it's not significant to the city's economy. It wasn't then, and it isn't wholly now.
Yeah.
But it probably will be. At some point, we'll think this is good to have here because it really serves industry. And there was a rail line to the industrial area that closed, so we bought the rail line. Shade Tree program really was, the Shade Tree program was not funded, and you can't get a Tree City USA award without funding. And the people that were doing the Shade Tree program were literally volunteers that would carry buckets of water and plant the trees themselves. So early on, I funded the Shade Tree program, I think with $20,000. We got the first Shade Tree award from the state. And now I think it's $500,000 a year that we spend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's an important program.
Wow.
So those things matter, the teen programs, a lot of those sorts of things. I've always had an opinion that that community's a lot like a body. It's either everything works or nothing works. Mm-hmm. And you need to attend to, you need to attend to the whole part of the body.
Yeah.
You can't just leave one part go, and you have to look to the future, like the airport or the rail line or the trees, because if you don't, the future will come anyway, and you clearly will miss something.
So you were making big time investments, knowing that down the road is going to be worth it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Was it? I'm curious. Your incredibly lovely and talented wife, Elaine. Did you meet her when you were, because she was so involved with the original restoration of the square? Did you meet her while you were working on the historic district stuff, or did you guys meet prior to you being mayor?
No, we met at Ella Canavan because I had her daughter in my 6th grade class. I met her at a parent-teacher conference.
Okay.
Yeah. And someone said to me, they said, well, this woman's coming, I get divorced, you might like her. And she came, and she left, and I said, you seriously? I said, I would never marry her. I'm not interested. I wouldn't marry her. I said, I wouldn't even go out with that. She had on she was a potter. I said, what is a potter? I didn't even, my idea of a potter was something that you smoked. It wasn't something that you, she came from work, I guess, making pottery, and I thought, nah, I don't think so.
You're like, no way.
Yeah. And then I married her a year later, so, I never know.
So without going into too much detail, who made the first move then? Did she, you or she?
I probably, if I say, I probably shouldn't say. I probably would be better off not doing that. But so it was really from her that I got I learned a lot about the Victorian part of the square.
Yeah.
Because where I grew up on the west side of Cleveland, I lived in a ranch house that my dad built, and my mother put like an eagle, like a metal thing over the garage. And that was her idea of making the house look historic.
Yeah.
It's a ranch house with an eagle on it. And then down the road from me were, flamingos and all kinds of things because I lived in, Parma.
Okay,
Parma.
yeah,
So,
you said flamingos, and I apologize for that. You said flamingos, I thought Parma.
So a kid from Parma coming here, I didn't know anymore.
This would be a whole new world. You don't have this in Parma.
No, there's no center like that. I mean, I actually lived in Parma Heights, and so it was way more residential. But it still was no solid community center. Our church was kind of a community center in my elementary school. But here, when I came here, I had the same impression people do that are just driving through today. It's like Brigadoon. It's like this just appeared. And, it didn't take any work. It just was here, and it looks like this, and it's to human scale, and it's a center. Most people don't understand the work that went into this, which is decades and decades of work.
You really love this town, don't you? This is not your hometown. You didn't go to school here.
No.
How has it become such a part of your soul? I mean, I just feel that in what you do and your approach and your passions about this community. What is that?
I think it's an understanding that is more prevalent when you didn't grow up here. I work with folks that grew up here and love the town. But coming from the outside, from the community, like I said, I grew up right off of Route 42.
Yeah.
In no town center, no other than church and school, no place to communal. And here, when I first came here, really before I moved, when I was teaching, I'd come to the band concerts sometimes and just be fascinated that here was this thing, and here's the Village Green. It's like New England, and then after being here, year after year after year. It has a sense about it, and I think a lot of my sense about it is simply it's something I didn't have. I didn't grow up with this, so I really appreciate what we have.
Yeah.
And like when I was trying to do architecture review, it's not. I don't want to be negative about council people I was working with, but a lot of them were from here, and the way it was, that's the way it is. This building we're in was covered up with a big metal thing, and nobody knew anything was Victorian. People thought the courthouse was colonial. They grew up here, and it was just their reality of the day. I came, and it was like I showed up in Disney World, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah, in some ways you're right.
yeah, here I am.
Yeah.
Disney World, fortunately, without I don't know, without the rides.
With
I was going to say without the crowds, but I don't know. I've seen the crowds on the weekend, and yeah.
What? I served as mayor, currently councilman at large. What's next phase for you?
Well, I'm working right now still as a councilman, actually.
Right.
Yeah. We sold our house, so that's a bit of a transition. And
Sure.
we rented a loft apartment at Farmers Exchange, and we have a house in the mountains in North Carolina. So it's a real we're kind of in the middle of a transition, but at the same time, I'm really focused on trying to continue what I'm doing on city council. With respect to the historic district. I've always had a philosophy, I think, that anybody can do anything once or temporarily. I mean, you can put on one great event and go, yeah, it's good. It's the maintaining of the whole. It's how do you maintain something. It's especially as important and as expansive as this downtown, this historic district that we have, the neighborhoods that we have here. How do you maintain it? And that kind of goes back to the body. You've got to maintain everything. You might be working out and have really good muscle control, but your eyesight's bad. You can't just ignore your eyesight. So it's important to me. The maintaining is the hard part, and that's the part that usually falls away because it's fun to do. Like, let's do this. Yeah. Let's restore the square, or let's have this event, or let's. But then, as days and months and years go on, somebody has to take care of it. Somebody has to. Somebody has to do the dishes. Somebody has to buy the food. Somebody has to clean the house. Somebody has to make sure the baby's fed. It's that part of it. Conception's a really quick thing, but boy, you got it for 20 years. I mean. I hope you enjoyed that.
You're right. Conception's a quick thing, but then raising the baby.
Yeah, you got
care of the baby.
Yeah, all through in college and whatever. But and the maintenance part is critical, and that's why maintenance of the downtown, the historic district, protection of it. That's the reason we worked for 6 years, which was a 6-year process that started out as the village that came to this. And if it's very important that we maintain the integrity of this nine-block district. The most important thing, though, ever, you can erase the district, you can erase the railroad, the airport, the trees. You could just get a big eraser and take it all away if you wanted to rate anything. And the thing that I will always feel the best about and know mattered the most was the equality legislation that we passed in City Council and that the President Council and I worked on for about 2 years, I think, to construct that, to get that through. We had to make some compromises, but when you look at that legislation and you think of its importance, if you don't have equality for people, if you don't have equality in a community, you don't have a community. That is a basic, absolute. That was absolutely an absolute necessity. That's the most important thing that I ever had a voice in, was that equality legislation.
To have equality for the entire community.
Yes.
Were you surprised at some of the very strong pushback on that? Or were you saddened by it?
I was saddened by it. I wish I wasn't surprised, but we assumed it was coming, and it did.
Yeah.
And it was in the vitriol and the very sad kind of expressions people had about it just were. But what made it work for me was I have them to give to the Archive Commission, is the hundreds of letters people wrote in support of it, and the people that showed up and spoke about their own personal issues, people that spoke in favor of it, the importance of it. And people thought it was risky to do, but to me, and I know to John too, we never saw it really as a risk. It was a risk you couldn't not take. People saw it as a political risk. A risk, like, oh, you won't get reelected. Okay.
Do you care?
No. If we could pass it, we knew if we could pass that legislation, that was what was important. And then whatever the fallout would be, we could deal with it. And then the thing was, the people that worked on it all got reelected, which really speaks to this community.
That's true.
Yeah.
Do you think in general our community, do we have a sense of community here? I mean, there's haves and have-nots, there's us's and them's, but do you see, compared to when you first came here in the mid-'70s, has Medina changed into a more holistic community? Are we more together or more separate?
I don't know. There's probably two parts to this, because I think when I came, the community was so small, and it was just it was during the movement of people here from the suburbs, like populating. So prior to that, I mean, it wasn't diverse, but it was probably it was a very close community. And then as people arrived, people like friends of mine and myself, really, it started to change the texture of the community as far as diversity and background. And I think those things were good I think they were good for us.
Yeah.
I think it changed the political possibilities of what we could do here, because there was more ideas generated from people that came from the outside. Yeah, the thing that concerns me, and I think we need to constantly, and we do need to actively address, is there are places here where housing needs to be maintained. There are places people live because they are lower income, and to the degree that we can, and it isn't an easy thing to do. It is important, I think, to have outreach to try to be accepting of diversity and to have diversity. I think we've come a long way. I think this community in that respect has come a long way from 20 or 30 years ago.
Sure.
But I think you can't just sit, it's like maintaining the buildings. You can't just sit back and think it'll happen. You have to work at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm always hopeful, though, about most everything, running for mayor, running for council, or teaching, or whatever, that you can, if you're willing to work at something, then you find out if you can do it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, you found out.
Yeah. I'm curious, in all of your political forays and your projects and things which you've undertaken, was there ever a fear of it? Like, if this doesn't work, I'm done, or maybe we shouldn't do that? Or has it always been, this is the right thing to do, and that's why I'm going to do it?
I think it was mostly the latter. The fear I never knew what to be afraid of, because, for an example, I proposed point of sale inspection of homes, because I looked at it as that way when homes are sold, they're always brought up to code, so all your housing and your commercial buildings are way more valuable. That's a good thing. Right. And then the Board of Realtors, said, well, we're going to run somebody against you because we're never going to accept point of sale. Yeah. Okay. And it wouldn't fly in council. So, okay, it didn't work. But nobody ran, I don't care if you're running against me or not. Good luck. So I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I think...
but that never stopped you from trying it?
No, I proposed a handgun control ordinance in the 80s because we were having a lot of issues with the police department was having a lot of difficulty and crime. And I got serious pushback on that, and it didn't pass, but hundreds of people showed up. That was when the guy spit on me at a city council meeting.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. It was but I thought it was worth a try.
Sure.
And then we turned it into a different kind of legislation. I'm working with the police department because it just didn't work. But I tried it, and I thought it mattered at the time. So, no, I've never really cared about it, because when people talk about that kind of fear, that's just about, it's almost always about I won't get reelected. And that's when you start doing things because you want to get reelected. And generally that's when the whole system begins to fail in what it's supposed to do. You have a responsibility to look ahead. You have a responsibility to maintain these things. And if some people are upset about it, if it's the right thing to do, then it's okay that they're upset about it. We're still going to do the right thing.
That's true. Yeah.
Right. And I've been wrong sometimes too, though. I don't want to sound like I'm like.
So we have that on public record.
Yeah, clearly, I've made as many mistakes.
But you try. That's what I love and appreciate about you. You're not going to back down. You try it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. When you have guests in town, and you've been here 50 years now.
Yeah.
What is kind of the Bill Lamb hit list of? I love my town so much. Here's what I want to make sure that you see, do, taste, experience.
The downtown. For sure, the entire circle of the downtown, the restaurants in the downtown, the neighborhoods. Those are the things that, And for me, you know, because people that are friends, a lot of them have the same kind of interest that I have.
Yeah.
And so those are the things that stand out for me, because that's what I think makes Medina Medina.
Okay.
The trees, the trees that we have. I don't know, it's a gorgeous place, even in the wintertime when there's no leaves on the trees. And if you go up in the firehouse, it's always amazed me, even 30 years ago, to go in the old firehouse and look down at the square, and when the leaves are on the trees, you almost can't see the square.
Right, just that
and
view.
and having been here this long, the trees have gotten so much bigger. It's kind of an amazing thing to watch. But yeah, the human scale of this place, I think, is one of the most attractive things about it. And so when you come from a different kind of setting, like I did, or people I know, so when people I know come here, and you look at it, I think you don't know what it is that makes you feel comfortable, but a lot of it is that these buildings are just a human scale.
Sure.
We can relate to the size. And people are always amazed at the number of businesses that we have, and that a lot of them are not, it's not chains, these are individual businesses that are successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bill, thank you so much for sitting down today and sharing a bit of your history.
No, you're welcome.
Look forward
Yep.
to seeing what's in the next chapter of your life and seeing what else you accomplish here in Medina, Ohio.
Thank you. Always good to talk to you, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.